Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Von Manor, where Roger and I have returned with my reading report. Normally it would be my weekend reading report, but I didn't have time to get it up on the weekend. So here it is on Monday. And, you know, last week I didn't have a weekend reading report at all. No reading report at all last week, so I guess I'm doing a little bit better. But I actually do have something to report this week, so there's that. Usually on my reading reports, I'll talk about what I'm reading, or what I read the previous week, what I'm reading now, what I'm going to read in the future, anything that's wandered into the manor, you know, any new stuff that's arrived. Nothing has wandered into the manor in the last couple weeks. Nothing. Not one new thing. What's going on, Roger? Usually I'll have some sort of comic book something or other show up at the manor, but no, not in the last 2 weeks. I'm not sure why that is, but nothing showed up. So let's just talk about what I've been reading. And of course, if you follow this channel at all, you know that it is Cimmerian September, and that what I have been reading is Conan. I've been reading Conan, and I've been having a great time doing it. So this is Robert E. Howard's The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian. This is the first volume in the Del Rey edition of Conan, which I will be talking more about tomorrow. I think I should have that video up tomorrow, where I go into detail about this book and some of my thoughts on reading it this time around. It's been actually quite some time since I've read Conan. Of course, I've read Conan a few different times in my life because Robert E. Howard is my favorite writer of all time. But it has been a little over 2 years at least, maybe 3, since I've read Conan. Maybe even longer than that, I'm not sure. But I really enjoyed it, had a great time, as I knew I would. But I do have some, you know, this did make me think some new things. You know, that's one thing about great books, is that if you do reread them, you will find something new in them every time. Usually, because usually you're reading them at a different point in your life. Different things are going on, and different things are going to strike you. And that is the case with this, The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian. So I did finish this. This is, like I said, part of the 3-volume Del Rey set, and I am on the second one right now. I'm smack dab in the middle of it. I've been reading these a little slower than I had hoped, just because I've been so busy. However, I do have a couple weeks off from work, so I'm hoping that'll give me some time to read Conan and kind of get to where I want it to be. And I think I'll manage that. This is fantastic. This is The Bloody Crown of Conan, which has 3 stories in it. It has the only novel that Robert E. Howard wrote about Conan, The Hour of the Dragon, which he originally wrote for a British publisher. There was a British publisher interested in his writing, but they decided they didn't want to go with short stories and said, hey, if you put together a novel, we'll look at it. So he wrote The Hour of the Dragon, featuring Conan. And they didn't publish it. But Weird Tales did, and it is one of my favorite things from Robert E. Howard, The Hour of the Dragon. It is my favorite Conan story. So I'm reading that now, and I'm having a really good time doing it. The next thing I'm going to read is this. Of course, this is the 3rd volume, The Conquering Sword of Conan from Del Rey. So this is the next thing I'm going to read. But what am I going to read after that? I was supposed to have it... Roger, what happened to that book? I was supposed to have that book sitting right... It's supposed to be sitting right here. I'm going to go find it. Okay, I got it. Well, it's going to be... The next thing I read after Conan is going to be one of 2 things. Before I get into Occult Detective October, I'm going to read one of these 2 books, and I don't know which one it is going to be yet. It depends on how much time I have after reading Conan. One choice is M.R. James' Collected Ghost Stories, which I'm reading for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, and also because I need to make a video on it for the Essential Classics of Horror series that I'm doing. Love M.R. James, really talented writer of supernatural horror stories. And so yeah, the collected ghost stories. The official pick is Ghost Stories for an Antiquary. Is it Ghost Stories? See, I don't remember again. Is it for an antiquary? Ghost Stories of an Antiquary. I get this wrong every time. The official pick for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club for next month is Ghost Stories of an Antiquary, but I'm reading all the ghost stories in this fabulous Oxford edition of the collected ghost stories. I'm either going to be reading this next, or I'm going to be reading Vericonium by M. John Harrison next. It's going to be one of these two, probably. Probably. It's probably going to be one of those two. I did read something else this past week. I was late getting to this. Now, normally every month normally every month I read an issue of Astounding science fiction magazine from 1951. And for August, I wasn't able to read Astounding because I was reading too much other stuff. So I caught up and I read the August issue of Astounding Science Fiction. So I still have to read the September issue of Astounding Science Fiction. But I did read August. I caught up. August 1951, Astounding Science Fiction. Look at that awesome cover. That's really cool. That is for the story The City of the Phoenix by M.C. Pease. And this was a really good issue, and it had a lot of cool stuff in it. What stories were in this issue? Let's see. Okay. For novelettes, City of the Phoenix by M.C. Pease, The Soul Empty Ones by Walter M. Miller, Jr., The Bodyguard by Vernon W. Glasser. And then for short stories, we had Courtesy by Clifford D. Simak. And so there's a Clifford D. Simak story that its first publication was probably in this very issue, I'm sure. Prometheus by Julian Chain. The Monkey Wrench by Gordon R. Dixon. The Price by Dave Dreyfuss. So there were some cool stories in this. And one of the great things about reading this magazine, other than the cool advertisements, more Dianetics. Man, Dianetics was almost always on the back cover of Astounding Science Fiction from this era. Your Health and Dianetics. Dianetics has nothing to do with your health. Dianetics is just a stupid book. Full of nonsense is what that book is. But one thing that this has is some great illustrations to go along with the stories that probably have not been reprinted since the original publication of this magazine. And that's one of the joys of reading these original Astounding Science Fiction issues. Just some of the beautiful artwork that accompanies the stories. It's just fantastic. And so I had a great time reading this, and I'm going to get to the September issue before the month is up, I'm hoping. So yeah, Astounding Science Fiction. I think this past week... Oh wait, there is something else I've been reading. Do I have it here? Yes. I have been reading The Exploits of Brigadier Gerard. I've read a few stories from The Exploits of Brigadier Gerard because that is this month's pick for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. I have that in the complete Brigadier Gerard. So what I've been kind of doing is I'll read a Conan story or two, and then I'll read a Brigadier Gerard story. It's not a long book. It's half of this. So, but I have been reading Brigadier Gerard by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the famed creator of Sherlock Holmes, one of my favorite characters of all. And this is a lot of fun. This book is a lot of fun, Exploits of Brigadier Gerard. I'm having a good time with that. Written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, so it fits right in with Cimmerian September. That was an accident, but it fits right in. So this has been fun. Also, I forgot to mention, I'm still doing the World's Finest Challenge, where I read Batman and Superman every day of my life. Still reading this, Golden Age Superman Volume 2 Omnibus. That's awesome. Finally finished the Silver Age Batman Omnibus, Volume 1, which was terrific. And I'm almost finished with the Silver Age World's Finest trade paperback, Volume 2. I never did get the omnibus of this, unfortunately, but it's awesome. So, a bunch of awesome stuff here. I've been doing the Sunday comics, which I missed the previous Sunday because that Sunday was really busy for some reason, but this past Sunday, not so busy. So I was able to read the Sunday comics. That's where I just get a stack of comic books, 8 to 10 comics, and I just read them. I just set them down, read them while I drink massive amounts of coffee. And since it's Sumerian September, the first comic book I read for this week's Sunday Comics is, of course, Conan. This is Conan the Barbarian, king-sized annual number 4. This is the mark of the Minotaur. That ridiculous creature that's fighting Conan, the bull with arms and a human face. That's the Minotaur. It's the Minotaur. Okay, it's one of the dumber creatures that Conan went up against. The issue, though, is not half bad. I mean, the plot of this issue is ridiculous, but a lot of fun, a lot of action. Conan's really cool as usual. This is actually the story in this, The Mark of the Minotaur, or the official title, if you open it up, The Return of the Conqueror. This is the sequel to The Hour of the Dragon, which is the Conan story I'm reading now. Although, at the time that this was published in 1978, when this was published, The Hour of the Dragon was known and published as Conan the Conqueror. So that was Return of the Conqueror, because this is the sequel to, well, The Hour of the Dragon, or Conan the Conqueror. And in this story, Conan is going to pick up his queen from King Tarascus. King Tarascus, who plotted against Conan in The Hour of the Dragon. At the end of that story, they made an uneasy truce. And this woman, Zenobia, freed Conan. We have a flashback here. She freed him from the dungeons. And so he promised to come back for her. And so he's coming back for her because he wants to make her queen of Aquilonia. And the artwork in this issue is by John Buscema and Ernie Chan, a great combination. And Roy Thomas wrote the issue. And as ridiculous as the plot is, there is Conan fighting the Minotaur. As ridiculous as the plot is, it's still a lot of fun and really entertaining. Yeah. And at the end of it, let's get to it. He does get his queen. So he ends up with the queen at the end, or the woman who is going to be queen of Aquilonia. Also at the end of this issue, we get this badass advertisement of the Hulk. I mean, look at that picture. That's awesome. What a great picture. Anyway, that was the first thing I read for Sunday Comics, Conan the Barbarian, King Size Annual number 4 from 1978. Then I read Worlds Unknown number 4, another issue number 4. Worlds Unknown, man versus monster while the Earth's fate hangs in the balance. This is an adaptation in this issue of Arena by Frederick Brown. Very popular story, Arena. You might remember the Star Trek episode where Captain Kirk fights the Gorn. That was based off of this story, Arena. The comic book story is much closer to Brown's original, although they do change some things. Like, the creature looks very different in the comic book version. When was this published? 1973. It has Gary Conway as scripter, John Buscema and Dick Giordano as artists. I'm not sure Dick Giordano is the best inker for John Buscema, but the artwork does turn out to be pretty cool, where we have our brave Earthman fighting a monster for the survival of the planet. They're fighting the war, this monster species in human beings in outer space. And so they're brought by this supreme intelligence to battle here in this strange world, which is an arena. Hence the name. And it's really, really good. It's an excellent comic story. And there's a backup story, which is much more forgettable, as those backup stories always are. But really good issue of Worlds Unknown. Worlds Unknown #4. That's awesome. So that was cool. What else did I read? Oh yeah, another issue #4. This is just a coincidence that these are all issue #4s. Chamber of Chills. Chamber of Chills. I can hear Steve Donahue in Boston groaning. He's not a fan of horror comics, but I love this one. This is Chamber of Chills. And this features a story, The Opener of the Crypt, by John Jakes. Now, one thing though is that the cover spoils the story. It tells you like one of the secrets of The Opener of the Crypt, but I guess they figured nobody cares. But the story is actually excellent, and this was has artwork by Frank Brunner in it, and it's really good. Really moody, dark horror story. It's great stuff. And let's see if I can. Yeah, look at that. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. This is excellent. So this is a John Jakes story, which is kind of a homage to Edgar Allan Poe. It's awesome. Chamber of Chills #4. Next, ooh, look at this. It's Orion, Lord of Atlantis #1. Orion, Lord of Atlantis #1. Man, this has got to be worth $1 million. This has got to be so valuable. Orion #1. Whew. Actually, it's probably not, because it's a pretty crappy comic book, actually. Sad to say. So this, Orion, was a backup feature in Warlord, which was another sword and sorcery kind of comic book. This is very much sword and sorcery. And so Orion was a backup feature in Warlord. But what they did with their first issue, now you got to figure, for a first issue, a lot of people, you would hope, would pick this up who didn't even know about that backup feature in, Warlord. Maybe they're just like, hey, it's a brand new comic book. I think I'll try this. You'd think they would, come up with a fresh opening and not have a lot of baggage holding you down from the previous series. No. This continues directly the series of stories that were going on in Warlord. And so you start off this comic book like straight in the middle of a very complicated, convoluted plot. And so it requires a ton of exposition to like even get you to understand what's going on in this story, and still it's unsuccessful. Still you kind of don't know what's going on, and trust me, there's a lot of exposition in this story. A lot. And so any forward momentum is kind of dragged down in the first several pages. And then you're tossed into this scene where there's an evil wizard taken over Orion's earthly body, which you didn't even know. You didn't even know he was separated from his earthly body until you get to this page, if you haven't read those previous stories in Warlord. And then you have this dumb character, who is the world's dumbest barbarian and nearly gets Orion killed. Is he a barbarian? I don't think so. I think he's just some dumb warrior, and I forget his name. But this is not great. When did this come out? This came out in 1982, Orion. Not fantastic. The artwork, though, is pretty good. Who does the artwork in this? The artwork is by Jan Duursema. Paul Kupperberg is responsible for the story. but the artwork's okay, so I'll give it that. Comic book itself, not so good. Not sure why I pulled that one out, actually. But I know why I pulled this one out. This is John Carter, Warlord of Mars #2. I've decided I'm going to reread the Marvel Comics John Carter series, which I haven't reread for a long time. But I remember fondly, at least the first several issues of it anyway. And this is issue #2. The artwork is still by Gil Kane, but the inks are by Rudy Nebres. Rudy Nebres, who isn't as good as the inker on the previous issue, but still, he does a pretty good job. He does sort of give Gil Kane a different look. Adds a lot of detail, and I don't know, there's something about it, though, that makes the artwork a little less dynamic, even though it's Gil Kane doing the art, but still, it's really, really nice. The first few issues had really great artwork. I think Gil Kane is probably the best guy to do this comic, even though there are some oddities that I noticed reading this comic. So, I know you can't really do this in a comic book, but on Mars, Barsoom, as Edgar Rice Burroughs conceived it, clothing is completely unknown. Basically, everybody is naked in the Mars series. Clothing is just this weird thing that Earth people wear. In this comic, of course, you're going to have clothing, but you think there would be less of it. A lot of the characters in this book just have, like, full-on, they're just wearing shirts and pants and everything else, where they could just have loincloths or something. To emphasize the fact that, you know, Mars is a little different when it comes to clothes. But no, the way Gil Kane conceives it, clothing is just kind of like a regular thing. Unless you're John Carter, and then you just, you know, don't wear a shirt. But other characters do here and there, and so it's a little odd. Like, as you can see, this character here, fully clothed. And you have robes on some of the Martians who are trying this character. He's on trial. And so that part was very un-Barsoomian. But everything else was pretty great. All the characters who are from the novels look just right, including the Thoats, the weird 8-legged Martian horse creatures that are on Mars. So this was great. Issue #2 was really, really good. This next thing is very strange. This is a very strange comic book. This is Elric, one of my favorite characters, Elric. This is Elric #1 from Pacific Comics. When did Pacific Comics publish this? Was it 83? It was 1983. So this was written by Roy Thomas, who also wrote Conan. And so he does Elric, but the artwork is just so weird, man. This is one of the... I mean, Elric lives in a weird world, and I always pictured it kind of weird. Not this weird, though. Man, the artwork in this is by Michael T. Gilbert and P. Craig Russell. And it's very, very strange. This is a very strange take on Elric. I mean, like I said, Elric is weird, so I shouldn't be surprised. But it's odd. This is a very odd looking comic. It's cool though. I mean, it's based on Elric of Melniboné, which chronologically is the earliest Elric story. And it seems to do a pretty good job of that so far, at least in this first issue. And I have read this before, but I read it when I was a kid. I literally haven't picked this up since I was a kid. Weird as it is, the artwork is just really trippy and really cool. Not exactly the way I picture Elric in his world, but interesting. It's very interesting. And the story is pretty spot on. Look at Elric there. Ha! Elric in his high-heeled boots. So this was an interesting read. This was an interesting version of Elric, which I I enjoyed. Like I said, not how I picture him or his world, but still really interesting. You know what? I'm going to save the best for last. I'm going to get to this next one first. This is The Savage Dragon #1. Erik Larsen's The Savage Dragon #1. This is from back when Image Comics first arrived on the scene, when a bunch of popular comic book creators left Marvel Comics and went to Image. And Erik Larsen's character was the Savage Dragon. And I don't remember much about it, except for the Savage Dragon is this mysterious, well, big green guy with a fin on his head who has superpowers, who becomes a police officer. Which seems like, you know, something that a superpowered being might do. If he actually wanted to fight crime, maybe you'd become part of an organization that would help you do that. And unlike a vigilante out on the streets, you wouldn't be, you know, breaking the law as you fought crime. It's interesting. You got this little pin up here of the Savage Dragon. It's okay. It's okay. The writing is a little choppy. The story has... Well, the pacing of the story is a little odd. This is an artist who is writing. And I don't remember how the series went on or if Larsen got better after this point. It's not bad. This is not bad. But it strikes me as being an okay comic with fun artwork at this point in the series. I read some of these Savage Dragons, but man, it was back when they came out, which was in 1990. Was this 93 as well? No, this is 92. This is July 1992. But the best thing I read as far as comic books this week, by far, had to be Tarzan. Tarzan versus Predator at the Earth's core. It's Tarzan versus Predator at the Earth's core. #1. It's written by Walter Simonson. Has artwork by Lee Weeks. And it's great. It's great. Of course, this is what, you know, the world needed. Tarzan to go to the Earth's core and fight Predator. Or, in this case, a lot of predators. So, yeah, this just opens up. This opens up the story of Tarzan going to the Earth's core with an expedition, because David Innes, the king of Pellucidar, something's happened to him and he's vanished. And there are all these killings happening in Pellucidar because we know that the predators are down there hunting folks. So here comes Tarzan and his friends. The Waziri are there. And, you know, they're going to find out what goes on. And they run into an awful lot of trouble. So this is going to be really cool. Again, I must have read this when it came out, but I don't really remember it. And we have at the end, we have a great cliffhanger where Tarzan is tied to a pole, and here come the predators. Here come the predators. What's he gonna do? How's he gonna get out of this one? I don't know, man. I'll have to find out in the next issue. But this was really cool. This was also a 90s comic. When did this one come out? 1996, it looks like. 1996 for Tarzan versus Predator at the Earth's core. And like I said, I didn't get anything in the mail this week, so I have nothing to show you. Absolutely nothing. I didn't even stop by the recycling center in El Cerrito to rescue books. Although, I'm planning on doing that tomorrow. So catch me tomorrow. I should have a Robert E. Howard show up tomorrow to talk about Conan. And then Epic Comic Book Wednesday, which is going to be an interesting Epic Comic Book Wednesday because we're going to be talking about Epic collections. I'm going to talk to Steve and see if we could veer away from Conan this 1 week, because this happens to be the 10th anniversary of Marvel Epic Collections. Marvel Epic Collections have been around 10 years, and so it's their anniversary. So I was going to do a special episode about that. And I've got an Occult Detective episode coming out, and I've got an episode about anthologies. Some anthologies, big fat anthologies that I want to read. And I probably have other things I need to talk about as well. But I will shut up now, and I will catch you next time.